Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie again, and we are making a video today to talk about the fact that Saturn has just moved into Aquarius. Saturn moving into Aquarius is a big deal. It's a big shift. Saturn takes approximately 2.5 to 3 years to move through each sign. The entire cycle of Saturn from one point back to its original point is approximately 28 and a half, 29 years. You probably have heard about the Saturn return. That's something most people know about. So I want to first of all talk about Saturn's cycle a little bit, and then we're going to use an example chart to look at Saturn moving into Aquarius. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the social ramifications and touch on a little bit about the last few times Saturn was in Aquarius. So first of all, as far as the cycle, I just said it's a 29-year cycle. So every quarter aspect of that cycle is approximately 7 years. So, you know, just on a silly kind of level that I often think about is everyone talks about in marriage or partnership, the 7-year itch. Okay, you know, and there's 7 years in so many different ways people talk about these 7-year cycles. And that's one of them. 7 years after a relationship starts is the first quarter square of Saturn to the relationship's Saturn, which is a time of some renegotiation. Oftentimes people struggle with it. When they get through it, it stabilizes, which is Saturn's real purpose, is to stabilize. It can create difficulty, hard work in the process, but the purpose is to stabilize. Another thing that's a real clear 7-year cycle is at age 7, I hear it referred to as the age of reason. It's really the first point in a child's life, I think, where they really start doing a serious separation from the parents, a real, distancing and separation and becoming more full in themselves. Okay, so that's, do you have any other examples of that 7-year cycle, Jennie?
Well, I think in science, there's this theory around where all of your cells live and die in 7 years. So it's almost like every 7 years you could say you're completely different than you were 7 years ago. Huh. So there are some other resonances of 7 too.
Yeah. 7-year cycles are really, really interesting to watch. Now, with Saturn moving into Aquarius, I'm going to pull up a chart. I went looking for a fun example chart, and what I ended up with, some of you may know who this is, some of you may not. It's kind of a silly one, but I thought it was good to use for this. And this is Sherry Lewis. If you know who she is, you know who she is. If you don't, that's okay. Sherry Lewis did a kids TV show on public television for many years. The only reason I'm really using her chart is because, as you can see, if you know the symbols, you can see that she was born with Saturn in Aquarius. Okay, so anyone who is born with Saturn in Aquarius, this period of time is their Saturn return, whether it's their first Saturn return, which would be happening at around age 29, their second Saturn return at around age 58, or Sherry Lewis, if she's still alive, I have no idea if she is or not, would be coming up to her third Saturn return. Now, if you have Saturn in Aquarius, regardless of how far into Aquarius is, this period of time with Saturn entering is going to begin to give you just a beginning taste of your Saturn return. If your Saturn is very close to the beginning of Aquarius, you might be getting it right away. But it's beginning the process of your Saturn return. Now, if you've got your chart in whole sign houses, like I always tell you, those of you who listen to my monthly videos, you're going to start here. You're going to look at the symbols. You're going to look for Aquarius. Okay, so in this chart, there's Aquarius. So for her, Saturn is currently just moving into her 5th house. Your chart, figure it out. Look at your chart, use whole sign house system, and figure out what house Saturn is moving into. So, Jennie, with this example, if you were somebody and Saturn was moving into your 5th house, what would you expect for the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, first question might be, do they have children? That might be where my head goes first, because the 5th house is the house of children. And then it might be a more general conversation around the giving of love. Where is the love that you've given into community? Like, what is your gift? And then other creative things, other creative pursuits. But really anything to do with creativity and children is going to be what we're going to look to with someone with Aquarius in the 5th house.
So that's where the work is going to be. There's going to be a lot of work in the area, whatever house you have Aquarius on, whatever house Saturn is currently moving into by transit is an area that for the next couple of years, you're going to be working hard on this. You've probably already been getting a feel for what it's going to be about. Saturn also, let's get clear, it doesn't just stay in there for the next 3 years. It is in there until, let's see, do you have the date off the top of your head?
I don't.
I have it in 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay, Saturn went into Aquarius on March 21st. That was what, 2 days ago?
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to stay in there. It's going to do its little retrograde thing. So it's going to move back into Capricorn on July 1st. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to stay in Capricorn. It's going to give us another little bit of time to work out the issues in that house that we've been struggling with for the last couple of years. It's going to focus us more on that between July 1st and December 17th. On December 17th, it'll move back into the 5th house where it will remain for the duration approximately 2.5 years. Okay, so looking for that, what are you going to be working hard on and learning in the area that Saturn is going into? As for a personal example, it's funny, Saturn's moving into my 6th house. And I started a couple of months ago a really serious fitness, really focused on fitness. And I've been exercising almost daily, which hopefully will prevent me from getting sick and keep me healthy. So wherever Saturn is, make sure you're putting in some serious concentrated energy. That should help to alleviate any of the difficulties of that placement. Do you have any examples? Where's yours moving, Jennie?
Well, my Saturn, my Aquarius, or it's my 8th house that's getting triggered. And that is time to work with other people's stuff, other people's values, other people's money, and just have really the task for me is having good boundaries with other people and to just navigate kind of where I end and other people begin. Yeah. So that's not a super tangible example.
Well, it's good. 8th house, you taught me some really good stuff about the 8th house. I've always thought of it as other people's baggage, other people's stuff. But you really brought in this awareness of how to work with it in a really powerful way in terms of boundaries and ritual. Mm-hmm. So with Saturn moving for the next few years through that 8th house, how are you going to engage yourself in terms of rituals and boundaries? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I just think I have a picture in my head just of setting these sort of intangible boundaries. So I think for me, it's rituals are like using smudge to transition from, because I work at home. So how do I work at home, but then live at home? So I need a boundary between the two. So going to my office, maybe having, smudging it to get me to ground in that space. And then now I'm at work. And then kind of exiting in and out of that would be an example.
Wow.
But I also just think of Saturn so much as like where we have to take responsibility. And we live in a society where taking responsibility is a revolutionary act. So I think that's a really important piece. The discipline and the responsibility. So for me in the 8th house, it's like I've got to take responsibility for setting my own boundaries, with friends, with work, and in this weird time of communicating with people online and just having to kind of find a new way to communicate with people. And that means a whole different set of boundaries. And I got to take responsibility. So.
And, so to go from this, as far as, personal charts and how Saturn is, impacting our own charts, and thinking of it from a bigger, more global perspective, to think about Saturn moving into Aquarius. We have, for the past 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, been working with Saturn moving through Aquarius, which is responsibility and, of these serious issues of government and big business. I mean, it's, Capricorn's been a rough place for Saturn, and we can see culturally a lot that's happened over the last 3 years. So now with Saturn moving into Aquarius, and Aquarius being the sign of technology, revolution, humanitarianism, that's where our responsibility is now required. And isn't it funny that it's happening right now as we're in this global kind of panic spot?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think it's going to play out? What do you expect to see over the next 3 years as far as the bigger picture?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think just look around you in this moment of this pandemic where all these things have shifted, and just think of how much things have changed in the last week, where we've gone from being busy and having busy lives and traveling and going from one thing to the next, and then all of a sudden, and we're all having to just like hunker down and be in our house and find whole new ways of relating. And like suddenly our neighborhoods have become much more important because we're in the neighborhood, whereas before we were leaving, driving away, going to our workplaces, going out to eat, and etc. And now it's like you're forced to radically change your viewpoint to this neighborhood locality. And so I think the humanitarian signification with Aquarius is to just think about others and how you can help, and how you can just look at from a bigger perspective of where we need to go as people. Like we need to, and then in a government way, we need to have better access to healthcare, especially in this country, the US. We need to have that. This is why people need paid sick leave. It's not just because they need to get paid when they're sick, which is true, but it's because it keeps all of us safe.
Right.
So just, we're inextricably linked.
Yeah.
So building on all of those concepts is where I hope we use this energy.
Yeah. And I think, the technology, the growth of technology in supporting humanity is going to be a place of huge shifts. I mean, already I've got a date tonight to watch a movie with 10 people on Zoom. I mean, that is Saturn moving into Aquarius. It's finding a technological way to hold together the community.
Yeah.
And what could be more Saturn moving into Aquarius than that? It's beautiful absolutely. To see.
Yeah.
And these technologies that support humanity and community are going to have to grow and expand. And, not like it's all going to be good. There's going to be hard stuff as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Saturn forces us to, right, like you said, to face responsibility, to be accountable. And we do. With Saturn moving into Aquarius, we have to take responsibility and be accountable for all of us, not just for ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're social distancing, not just for our own health, but for the people in our lives. And that's Saturn in Aquarius right there.
Yeah. And I think other hopes would be too that people need to come together, or scientists are coming together to work on vaccines, and try to figure out how to develop that. It's a very important piece. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Saturn moving into Aquarius is really shining that hard light on how unprepared we are.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this sort of this irony too between the social distancing, which I mean you couldn't. That's Saturn in Aquarius. Social distancing is the summary, but it's sort of an irony in social distancing, but at the same time learning how to help one another better. Like learning, try to look around and does the older person a couple doors down from me need a helping hand with groceries or what have you. So it's kind of this irony of like if you have that you got to have good boundaries in order to have healthy interactions. It's a very clear
It'll
connection.
be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch how it goes on. Jennie and I had talked about going back and looking at the previous cycles of Saturn. And I don't know, do you want to do that? Or do you think that's...
Well, I can just mention just really quick,
Okay.
just the two last times that I looked at. So 1991 was the last time Saturn was in Aquarius. So 29 years ago, and that is when the Hubble telescope launched. And once that was launched, we had a much more powerful view into space, and learned so much more in the field of astronomy since that time. Another quick thing, the big deal, the USSR formally came to an end in 1991. And I mean,
That's a little concerning. That's a little concerning, just the reflection.
Yeah. And I mean, but just like the Cold War coming to an end, and that's also as far as civil rights themes, the Rodney King incident happened where it was filmed that he was being beaten, and his whole plea, like, why can't we all just get along? So that's just a real quick. Tons of other things happened in that time frame, but real quick, 1991, and then the time before that, 1963, 64, we had JFK as president, which unfortunately he was killed a year and a half later. But then we also had John Glenn orbited the Earth for the first time. Yeah. So that famous photograph of Earth.
And the social unrest building at both of those periods of time. So much social unrest.
Yeah. So, and like Mandela was arrested in 64. I mean, so there's the similar themes around civil rights, and you can kind of look at each Saturn phase. Right now we're looking at Aquarius as these 30-year chapters of like what began and what was going on in those time frames and where is it now. So civil rights in the 60s, civil rights in the 90s, civil rights now. So just kind of thinking about things like that in that way.
Yeah, if you think back, depending on how old you are, if you think back to those periods of time, and the time before that was 1932, 33, you think back at those periods of time, for yourself, that Saturn was in your chart where it is now. So along with what was going on in the culture, what was going on in your life in 1991 that you can feel reflections of now? What was going on in your life in 1962 that are reflecting in your life now? I probably don't have a lot of people watching this that were born before 1932, but if you're there, what was going on in your life in 1932? You were probably just a baby. At any rate. So yeah, it's interesting to look at the social piece and the personal piece side by side.
Yeah. There's lots of different ways you could go about it. I mean, the Beatles started in 63. The first woman in space from the USSR was in 63. And I mean, you could go on and on, but it's really great to see these different movements and how they grow and evolve over time.
Yeah. That one in 62, so many of the social movements were just planted then. If you think of that, it was just the planting of so many social movements at that time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. So we will see what the next few years brings personally and socially. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about with this, or you feel like we've handled it?
No, I think that's a pretty good mention of Saturn in Aquarius. And I just wish everyone the best through these difficult times, and take care of each other and do your meditation practice. And
On another note as well, Jennie can be reached at hiddenpath.com.
Or
Is that right?
hiddenpathastrology.com. Yeah.
Hiddenpathastrology.com. I can be reached at astrolore.org, not com, .org. We're both available for consultations, for teaching, for questions. Reach out, and I think I'm going to post this right on YouTube. If that's where you're watching this, leave a note. Let us know how this is impacting you and your chart. We would love to hear it.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennie.
Thanks, Laurie. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.